Welcome to Fireside Chats, Leadership Journeys, brought to you by the Office of Academic Clinical Affairs and hosted by Dr. Carolyn Porta. These chats bring together University of Minnesota Health Sciences students with experts for candid conversation on leadership, career pathways, sources of joy, and strategies to rejuvenate.
Welcome to this Fireside Chat. I'm Carolyn Porta. I'm an Associate Vice President here in the Office of Academic Clinical Affairs, and I'm delighted to have a conversation today looking at not just our healthcare professions and where we are all going in our specialties, but also looking at the arts and looking at where art and science can intersect and make more positive impacts than what we might do just individually in our patient population care. So I'm delighted to have Dr. Jon Hallberg with us and Mr. Brennan Vance, and we'll just get started. So, Dr. Hallberg, who are you?
So, hi everybody, Jon Hallberg. I probably most identify myself as being a family physician. And I don't normally say this, but I will say to this group that I chose family medicine very intentionally because I'm a liberal arts guy. I was a chemistry major in college, but I probably could have or should have been an English major. Was in the band for 4 years. My wife is a music educator. We met in the band in college. Family medicine for me is absolutely the liberal arts approach to medicine. I love knowing something about a lot of things. I love being a generalist. I chose it because I didn't want to have kind of the PhD knowledge of the heart or the kidney or the brain or bones. I really liked just knowing something about a little something about almost everything, that has just suited my personality so well. I'm a professor in the Department of Family Medicine in the medical school. I'm at a clinic just by the Guthrie Theater, which is also kind of wonderfully, parallel to my story. I tell people I get to if you know the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, it's this giant blue sort of box, and the architectural metaphor is it is a factory of ideas. So I love to tell people that I work in the shadow of a factory of ideas and sort of want to feel that sort of creative osmosis is just sort of there. We have this art-filled, light-filled clinic. I had a chance to help design it when it opened, and then 10 years later when it remodeled and expanded, got to roll up my sleeves. And then I've carried that over into some other clinics in this sort of portfolio of clinics that I help oversee. But for tonight's purpose, I think the title, I have a few titles, a few hats, but the one that I really like and that brings Brennan and I together is in my capacity as creative director of the Center for the Art of Medicine, which is in the medical school. We're now celebrating just about our 6th year of existence. We were born right as the pandemic was starting. And in that capacity, I've had a chance to weirdly kind of help produce some films, and Brennan and I have had two essentially completed films together, and then have a third one that we're working on, and we'll obviously weave those into the conversation tonight. But that gives you a little flavor of who I am. I live in Minneapolis. I've got 2 kids. I have a daughter who's 25, getting her master's in speech therapy at the U, and then my son is turning 30, and he's finishing his PhD on the St. Paul campus in conservation science. And he's been studying bird building, bird glass collisions all over campus. Like the 2 campuses are kind of his working laboratory. So if you see any signs on campus that say stop the thud, and if you see a dead bird and you take a picture of it and you upload it, that's his project. So that's my boy Andrew. So there's a little bit about me.
That's fabulous. Thank you. So he would be one to speak to putting those dots on the windows or I see
Exactly.
that on some of my neighbors' houses now.
Yeah, and if you go to any of the new buildings on campus, they have like little thin black lines or dots.
Mm.
The most offensive, that's probably the right way to say it. The worst offender on campus is the cardiovascular research building, kind of on the other side of the Huntington Bank Stadium. It's this 3, 4 story glass building that has like a concave. It's just like a catchment. It's like if you're a bird and you're flying at high speed and you want to die, that's the way to go right there during the spring and fall migration. Yeah.
Okay, that's a picture. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Mr. Brennan Vance, who are you?
Ah, like everyone, like John, like all you amazing people on this call, I contain multitudes. I mostly am a filmmaker. I think that's kind of how I introduce myself. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a proud member of the Minneapolis community right now. Born and raised here, and lived pretty much my whole life here, except for a few years I spent in New York. But I'm an alumni of the U of M, and yeah, I basically, I was just thinking about this the other day with a friend. I basically I've been making my bones, as it were, as a filmmaker for about 20 years now. I graduated from the U. I had a job at the Seward Co-op for like 3 months as a stock boy. I was a terrible stock boy. I like to say I quit before they could fire me. And I basically picked up a camera, borrowed some friends' cameras, and I've been, making my rent ever since as a camera person, as a filmmaker, as an editor, as a director, as a producer. Many of the hats that I wear are within this film world, and I'm pretty lucky and I'm very grateful that almost every day I get to do something related to my passion, which is telling stories and doing that in a visual way. So especially in the creative world, that's very rare that I'm not taking jobs outside of my field, which I have so many friends that do, and end up leaving the field just because it's so hard to balance multiple lives. So I'm one of the lucky ones that graduated with an art degree from the University of Minnesota, and I've actually been living as an artist ever since. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. Just hearing y'all what you're doing, like, I'm impressed. And I hope I have something insightful to share with you. If this was a 3-hour conversation, I'd like to interview all of you because you seem to be doing really, really cool things. So thumbs
Thank
up, check
you.
out the work. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you. We can make that happen, of course.
Do it.
We'll do the Joe Rogan version
Stop
of
recording
these
me.
fireside
I've
chats.
talked enough out there. I'm just kidding.
No, I wanna linger here for just a minute. So what's your favorite part of the filmmaking? And could you give us a brief synopsis of one of your favorite films that you've done?
Right. Great question. So I work in several aspects of the film world. I've worked in fiction. I've written and directed fiction. I pay the bills by doing commercial work. Most recently for companies like Best Buy and the University of Minnesota and all sorts of folks. And then I think the most transformative type of film work that I've been able to be a part of is documentary. And specifically, the last few films I've been on, either as director or cinematographer, have been really, really special and really, really profound to me. Also, I'll share a little bit about that. But basically, what's amazing about being a documentary filmmaker, and being one that has my set of skills where I can direct and hold a camera and edit together all at the same time, is I'm really able to immerse in these stories in a very, very immediate way on many, many levels. And that's a huge privilege. So often I'm being either invited into a project like Jon has built, or I'm creating my own project that is a collaboration with the people in front of the camera. I'm often hiring folks behind the camera too, and that's a very different kind of collaboration. But in the storytelling, when you're telling someone else's story, it is a collaborative thing. You're asking for their trust to share this time with them, to have a camera in very sometimes intimate settings, and then having that trust to turn those experiences into a story that will hopefully move an audience. So I'm often have a camera on my shoulder, in the rooms that I have no business being in, hearing conversations I have no business hearing, having people tell me and share intimate details and experiences of their lives, which, again, I would never be in that situation if it weren't for, having a camera and having a story to tell. And that's a huge privilege. It puts me in other people's shoes. It puts me in different life experiences that aren't my own, and that is transformative. And that is, I think, the power of storytelling is, that's the aspect that I love about it is it puts someone else in someone else's shoes. Like it's as simple as that. What is it like to be a certain person in a certain time in a certain place? And how can that expand our sense of the world, our sense of ourselves, our sense of possibility? Like that's what we're doing here. And so when I get to do that, it's like mind blowing for me, but I feel like a big responsibility to have a lot of care for the person that's lending their story and the people that are going to view that story. So one of the favorite films that I've worked on, and I can't not say one that John and I worked on because I want to totally hit it a lot tonight because we won't talk much about the one that's coming out in just like a little bit, but this one that we've just gone through that kind of had this really beautiful magical life of its own was a film called How to Care. And we can dig into the details later, but um, basically it's a story about an artist named Dan who's in his 70s and he lives with cerebral palsy, and it's about him and about the team of care workers around him, right? And for reasons we can get into later, like this was a really amazing, transformative experience for me, and mostly because it popped a lot of my own bubbles about my own privilege and about my own standing in the world. And I also know that this story meant so much for the folks involved, and they felt seen and they felt appreciated in a way that they, at least how they told it to me, was that they had never been appreciated or seen in that way. And it's actually, I think someone mentioned, was it C, mentioned it was you're working with GWEP. John can get into the details. It was a GWEP funded thing. So there's some synergy here. But that alone, just like being able to show the finished film to this group of people that were involved in it, and just being able to watch themselves in a way that they had never seen before. These are, the most selfless, people in the most sacrificial line of work that are often mistreated through just how many hours they're given, how little pay they're given, how little standing they are given in the world, politically, socially, etc. And then here's this filmmaker who's here to like tell their story and gets it and like, caught some stuff on camera that feels real to them and feels like, wow, someone saw that, someone appreciates that, someone wants to tell that part of our story. Like, I didn't think that was possible. So being able to be a part of that has been, selfishly life-changing for me. But that's the meat of what I'm trying to do, is try to be a part of something like that. That's generative, that's positive, that's creative, and also is inclusive and open and generates compassion, generates curiosity, imagination. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hallberg, John, you had a vision for this. You've been doing patient care and you saw the power and the potential. Tell us a little bit more about how you've brought this to life. You went from radio to film, radio and TV to film. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, this was never ever on the dance card, right? Like you never think this is going to happen. I went to medical school to be a physician. I was and am a physician. I see patients. I've got 1,000 people in my panel that I care for, some of whom I've known for 30 years. And I think of medicine the way that many of us, whether you're a dentist or you're a doula or you're a physician, I mean, it's one-on-one, right? It's very intimate. And that's a whole nother story, but kind of the almost sacredness that occurs when you're in an exam room or you're at the bedside. It's really beautiful, but it is one-on-one, right? It's just, I can help this person in front of me. And yes, there's a family or there's others, but it's a very, it's a very intimate thing. That's maybe the best way to think about it. And there's nothing I regret about that. There's nothing to diminish that. It's really important. But it's incredible when one's able to share stories, share wisdom, share knowledge in a larger way. And I think that that's so stumbled into work with Minnesota Public Radio. So for about 18 years, I was the regional medical analyst on All Things Considered with Minnesota Public Radio, not national, but regional. But one of those spots would hit 34,000 people at any given time when people are listening. And that was scary. Because knowing who's listening to NPR, like, holy crap, I gotta get this right. So I'd always do my homework ahead of time. They're always pre-recorded, sounded like they're live, but generally they're pre-recorded. And that I did that until 2021. And part of it was getting burned out of pandemic talk and COVID-19 talk. And I have to be quite honest, I'm glad I'm not on now because it would be so difficult to counter everything that's being said, coming out of certain places that we used to trust. And now we don't, what are we hearing from the CDC or what are we hearing from NIH? And it's just such a mixed message. Maybe that's an argument for doing it because we need that positive message, but I just don't quite have the bandwidth for that. So in 2020, right as the pandemic was starting, Jacob Toller, kind of wanted to create something where we incorporated the arts. And I'm going to too many details. We came up with this idea of calling something the Center for the Art of Medicine, which is the idea like there's the science of medicine, but then there's the art of medicine, and it's not soft or, I was thinking it's like it's not a counter to, it's not like the poor cousin to the science of medicine. In my world, I mean, honestly, it is either balanced, it's inseparable, it's a little, it's 50-50, or many days it's like 90-10, the conversation, the connection, the empathy. Yeah, there's science behind what I'm prescribing or what we're diagnosing, but a lot of it is really human. And then well, another story would be like why I think like primary care and much of what we do is going to be pretty AI proof because AI is scary and it's just a wild west and people actually want to be touched and they want to be listened to and they want someone to put a stethoscope on their lungs and listen. But anyway, one thing led to another. I won't go into again all the details, but in early 2020, had this opportunity because the dean wanted us to do something to buoy the spirits of frontline workers. Like, what can you do with this new center? Got some money. And I said, well, what if I took this radio show concept I'd been doing for a while with live shows, using a couple actors, a couple musicians, presenting medical topics to people in a really creative way. Can't do that live anymore. We're stuck. What if we took that concept and turned it into a show, a TV show? So I reached out to Sylvia Strobel, who was a college classmate of mine, who is the president and CEO of TPT, said, hey, I got a crazy idea. What do you think? And she said, that sounds great. I'm going to connect you with some people. I think within a week or two, we had an agreement to do a show and got paired. I mean, like this person dropped from heaven, Brittany Shrimpton, that Brennan knows very well, who is one of the great human beings, in this world, in this field. And she kind of helped shepherd and create this thing into a television show. So we created a show, ultimately called Reflections on the Pandemic, using actors and storytellers and musicians. Everyone's recorded, in safe ways, tested, wearing masks. I mean, we put this thing together and it was beautiful. And it aired statewide. It got picked up for national distribution. It ended up winning a regional Emmy Award. And with all that, TPC said, you're kind of onto something. Why don't we create a four-part series? So we did, that was the pandemic. Then we did one that was called Speaking of Race, about the experience of our colleagues of color who in kind of going through healthcare, specifically medicine. The next one was called Healthy Aging, and did got a John A. Hartford grant to support that. Focus on the four M's of aging, so mobility, mentation, medication, and what matters. And then the fourth one rather was on disability, culture, and creativity. And so we did that. And then, I mean, it's a quick thing that just to tie back into How to Care, which I still cannot watch and not cry. And I say that with pride, that it is it is like physiologically impossible for me not to watch that and not tear up. So Brennan, the magic you put into that was just something, and the people whose stories we're telling. But we gotta, so see, you're on there. Yeah, there you are. We had we applied for the GWEP grant pre-pandemic, and one thing led to another, and we turned a portion of the GWEP grant into a film. And then Jim Pacala, my boss, thought we should focus on direct care workers because this is just such a big deal.
Mm.
And boy, was he onto something in that idea, that kernel of an idea. And then Brennan and I together interviewed some potential folks, and then we finally found these folks at Living Well Disability Services, and then Brennan single-handedly, got out there, found Dan, and the minute he met Dan, it was like he knew he had his subject and the team, which I just want to state, by the way, the caregivers we profile from Liberia, Germany, and Kenya. So his three main care workers are immigrants,
Mm.
and it's just such a story that is so relevant right now of our care system and what's happening in Minnesota and the country. So anyway, I had no idea that this would ever happen. Stumbled into it, happy accident. I love film. Film is probably my favorite art form, quite honestly. It blends photography and story and lighting. I mean, just everything into it. And I think that as healthcare people on this call, like it's all about empathy, right? Like understanding what people are going through. And in 15 minutes, 24 minutes, 90 minutes, you can go to a different country. You can experience what someone has gone through. You may understand a condition that you didn't understand before. It's such a powerful medium. I mean, yes, podcasts, and yes, books and literature and reading the paper, reading the news, but there's something about the compactness of film done well that is just blows me away. And it's like such a honor to be in the orbit of it. It's so fun.
Mm. What I appreciate about what you're both sharing is that you don't necessarily know where you're going to end up when you're in school, when you're launching your career. And with most of our guests, we hear the same message that you just don't know where your road is going to take you as long as you're open and curious and following some of those open doors and respecting the ones that close. It's really fascinating where you can end up. So, students, you're welcome to put comments or questions in the chat for me to screen. I would love if Jon and Brennan, you would share a little bit more about your process and your collaboration. One of the big questions that we get from a lot of our interns is really that how to navigate the interprofessional, multidisciplinary collaborations. In healthcare, we speak mostly the same language, but bringing healthcare alongside filmmaking, those are different vocabularies, possibly different lenses and priorities. You don't seem like the type that we're going to wrestle it out on the mat, but I imagine there might have been some differences of perspective, and I'd love to hear a few comments about the actual development.
Brendan, why don't I start just because it's kind of the natural way, I suppose. Like I had a story idea, I came to you, and then I'll get out of the way like I do with the president, more or less. So with How to Care, it was I was going to take one of my radio shows around the state of Minnesota, like to like do it in church basements, do it, talk about healthy aging in the four M's. But post-pandemic and post-success with our TPT shows, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I thought that doesn't make sense. We're going to have 100 people or 50 people. I want to do something that's going to have a wider audience. So we got permission from HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration, to repurpose the dollars. I had to do a little work behind the scenes. Not realizing, by the way, this is the work of a producer. Like you're kind of working on, like you got this idea, so you got to get the money lined up. And then I had this money, and then it's like, and Brendan knows this. I went to Brittany Shrimpton and said, "Hey, Brittany, we had this great success with these shows. Would you be interested in doing this?" And she couldn't because she was busy with a TV show on TBT called Relish, which recently won a James Beard National Media Award.
Mm.
And so she politely declined. But the person, I mean, there was like not even a hesitation, like who to recommend was Brennan. And you should all know that Brennan's secret power is his eye, and people talk about like his lens or the way he sees things. It is gorgeous, and it's gorgeous in the way it tells the story. And obviously, it's the direct, it's the editing, it's the whole package. But Brennan's got a gift for cinematography, and not everyone has. Not all filmmakers have that, but Brennan's got it. And I poked around his website a little bit, and then I just reached out to him and said, "Hey, would you be interested in working on a film with me?" So Brennan, maybe I'll just stop at that point because you can kind of tell the story then. Like you got this, rando is sending you an email and you're responding to it, but I'll let you just pick it up from there.
Those are the best emails to get from a rando that says like, "Hey, I got a crazy idea. Do you want to jump on board?" And I'm like, "Yes, I got time this afternoon. What are you doing?" Um, that's kind of how it went. We met. We hit it off immediately. Um, yeah, and the rest is history. I mean, I think we um, share a lot of similar sensibilities in terms of what we appreciate. So, all that was baked into the project. I, know and love Brittany. Jon knows and loves Brittany. There was a connection, and it rarely ever happens like that, honestly. But with a lot of collaboration, with a lot, and I've been around a lot of collaborations in my life that just haven't worked, often because it's just too many cooks in the kitchen.
Mm.
And in filmmaking, there's many, many kitchens. So there can be many, many cooks as long as we're all not trying to chop the same carrot at the same time. So Jon had this great, amazing project. He had already built it up, and he's like, "Hey, can you just take it from here?" Um, that said, I mean, you did a lot of work after we met, Jon, just mining your community in the medical world, just putting out feelers saying, "Hey, we have a kind of a specific idea about a story that we want to tell. Does anyone have any leads?" And so I forget exactly what route you took, but it was like a friend of a friend of a friend of
Well, let me
Jon's
just pause just for a
colleague.
quick.
Yeah.
It was social media. I mean, ironically,
Social media.
right? So like Carolyn, you were mentioning this before, like the changing landscape, and so because we were kind of coming up. I mean, I thought like, well, should we focus on one of my patients who has a direct care, provider, and it just got kind of stuck and nothing quite happened. So finally, I went to both LinkedIn, old person Facebook, and then Facebook. I didn't do Insta. I didn't go to some of the other, social media outlets we could have. So I just put the question out there like, hey, we are making a film. We're interested in making a film about direct support professionals. Does anyone have any leads? And someone who had been at the Weizmann Art Museum, who had left the Weizmann for Living Well Disability Resource. I mean, like, it's just crazy, like how she happened to be there. Jamie Young is her name. And she goes, Jon, I think we might have something. And I think, Brendan, we ended up interviewing maybe three different groups, like they're representing three different sort of
Yep.
institutions or whatever. But you and I had a joint interview with Heather and
Uh-huh.
Jamie, as I recall.
Yep.
And it was kind of like, okay, like the energy on this call is so cool. And then I'll put it back to you because you went out there then to
Yeah. I
scout the
mean,
planet.
there's no what's amazing about that connection with Jamie and Heather. There's no shortage of like amazing care workers out there. That's one thing we learned early on. It's like for as as many care workers there are, there's as many amazing stories. Like everyone in this field has an incredible story where they came from and why they're doing the work and what dignity they represent in that work. So that was just like we couldn't go wrong there in terms of just casting our movie. But what happened was that I went and visited some of these care workers that Heather introduced us to, and then we found Dan, the person that they're caring for. And it clicked in my mind at that point, and I'm not sure why it didn't click beforehand, but not only did we want to share a story about these amazing care workers, but we wanted to show kind of the evidence of their work. And that would be a person who life has been transformed by their care, right?
Mhm.
That tells just as much story of a story about these care workers as anything. Like, here's the proof of what they do. This person who has been in a wheelchair since, before he could remember, has lived his entire life with cerebral palsy, non-verbally, but has this incredibly rich mind, is an incredible artist, and through their care, he's able to live just like this amazing life of travel, life of creativity, life of art, life of expression. Whereas even just a few generations before him, that was not a life that was possible, and it was probably a pretty short life. But here is a man in his mid-70s who's a prolific painter, that can't move his arms, he can't move his legs.
Hmm.
But also at the same time just an incredibly ebullient, positive, complex person who communicates so much without even saying a damn word. Like, he's amazing. And so being able to share a portrait of him was also a portrait of the care of these
Hmm.
folks. And the care workers also happen to be amazing people. So I will take zero credit for how amazing this film is based on those people being amazing. I was there just to do my job, which was to, like John said, capture it through the lens and have a perspective on it. That was the job. The amazing
And
thing was already built up for me. Um,
hmm.
you mentioned something about, I don't want to take us too far into a different direction, but you mentioned something about interdisciplinary. This is something I think a lot about, and what I was so excited about meeting John is there's my favorite author is Kurt Vonnegut, and he had this theory that great writers don't actually come out of MFA programs. He
Hmm.
spent a lot of years teaching at the Iowa Writers. He's like very unimpressed with everyone there. The people that impressed him are the ones that happen to like also be mathematicians, or they were biologists, or they were like psychologists. They had a different perspective, and writing was just a way to explore that unique
Hmm.
perspective they have.
Hmm.
I love to gripe about the filmmaker Quentin Tarantino, who is one of the most famous filmmakers of all time. I don't like his movies because I feel like he's just making movies about other movies or copy pasting. There's
Hmm.
a real pleasure in those movies. Obviously, they're great, but at the same time, I'm j- I feel like the author there is just reiterating what he's seen in a movie theater. There's nothing new there. My favorite films and my favorite documentaries are about something very rich and something very specific and something very personal that takes me into a place that I've never considered, or I didn't know about it. It gives me access to a mind or a life that, um, I have, again, I have no right being involved in other than just through this medium of art. And so, when a world opens up, like John has opened up for me, this world into the, medical world, into the world of care, that is just like such a rich um, landscape, rich terrain for me to explore because it is new, it is novel, it is a totally different frontier for someone like me who doesn't come from that world. And to meet that world with a filmmaker's eye and a storyteller's eye is really, really powerful. And I think something unique is created there when two unexpected forces meet, right? And you're not just
Hmm.
copy pasting from the guy that came before you.
I appreciate what you're both sharing. Some of the things that we try to emphasize with the interns is to have that balance and that diversity in what they're learning, not only to be learning in your discipline, but to also read books and listen to music and find podcasts. You don't have to double, triple major, but you need to be a human, not just the one vein. So I want to take us into some practical skills and suggestions for the listeners, and then I want to wrap up with some suggestions, a few more of your favorites from each of you. One of the questions that was shared with us was about listening. And I look at you, John, and I have to say, you definitely don't come across as the stereotypical physician. You come across actually sounding like you want to listen and take time, even though you're in a clinic environment that still tells you move pretty quickly from patient to patient. You have 1,000 patient base. In my work as a forensic nurse, I have the luxury of taking all the time I need with a patient who's presented to the emergency department having just experienced violence. I have no pressure. I have no other patient load. I have learned to love listening to that lived experience. And it is a skill to listen. It's also a skill to ask questions and to then document what people are sharing in a respectful, honorable way. So, what this question about listening, I think, is very poignant, and I wonder if each of you has a tip or a suggestion on how you've learned to listen, how you've learned to listen.
Go for it, John.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just jump. I mean, I honestly, I think it's curiosity. I think it's like I am just a really curious person. I walk in the room. Now, granted, the people that I'm seeing, I know pretty much everybody. Every once in a while, I'm seeing somebody who's new, but at this point in my life, in my career, it's my 30th year of being a physician after residency. You can do the math, you can get a sense of how old I am.
We will.
And
We're doing the math.
exactly. All right. So you walk in the room, someone's reading a book. Like, what book are you reading? Oh, I've read that too. I love that author. Or, oh my gosh, your teacher. You've been to Banff. Do you like Banff? You like Lake Louise? Like it's just like you're just kind of like reading the room, right? And it's just, and then if I don't know the patient and will say something other than, boy, it's really cold outside today, isn't it? Like something that's just trite. It's not. There's no. I mean, it's you can do that, but it's just sort of this natural thing. And I think that. I mean, I'm always leading with something that has nothing to do with like, well, tell me about your sore throat or tell me about your headache. I mean, of course that's why they're there, but it's deeper than that. It's more than that. And so I think it's like I mean, I'm interested in people. I'm interested in humankind and, where people are from, where they've lived, where they're traveling to. It's really rich. And I know that patients also crave that, and I think that, I mean, just to give you some example, like our clinic, our little clinic in Minneapolis, people come to it from 300 zip codes. Like it's just crazy. It shouldn't be. I feel guilty about the carbon debt that people are, whether they're flying back from Atlanta and staying with a family member and coming in the next day for a physical, or they're coming back from Florida or Palm Springs. And obviously there's a certain amount of privilege involved with that too. But people people are like not glued to the clinic, but I think, and it's not just me. There's seven of us that people are coming to see, and they even shout out Maggie, the lab person who is from Hong Kong, who drives from Farmington, Minnesota, every day to our clinic to work at our clinic, has
Mm.
been there for 17 years, and people go out of their way to mention her by name how great she is with blood draws, because it's probably the most unpleasant part of a clinical visit is maybe getting a shot as number two, and number one would be having your blood drawn. Maybe there's worse things that can happen, but I think also because she's you know kind and asks questions and distracts people while she's doing her blood work. And it's so I think she too carries a certain curiosity and kindness and compassion. So I think the listening, it's just I want to know, I want to hear. And I am lucky we have a little bit more time maybe with our patients in some clinics. We don't have a 15-minute schedule or a 10-minute schedule. Our visits are a little bit longer, so it allows
Mhm.
a little, we'd say in film, like a beat, you get like a little pause or a little breath, there's just something there. And that really makes a big difference too.
So
So
let me linger for 1 second before I go to Brennan. Curiosity sounds like it's key, and I agree with you. Can that actually be developed, or do people have it or they don't? And as new grads going into the workforce, they're pretty dictated by trying to get things right and not mess up. Do they even have space to be curious?
yeah. But I think curiosity drives scientific discovery, right? I mean, it's like
Mhm.
someone's asking, like, how could this be possible? What could we do to make this surgical procedure go better? So I think curiosity drives so many things. You could argue it's like the most, Einstein was curious, asking the biggest questions in the universe. People can, so I think that, so how can you teach that? I think I mean, I'm a big fan of liberal arts, whether or not you're in a liberal arts path or not. I mean, many of you are in grad school at this point. So to that point, be widely read, I mean,
Mhm.
read books, read articles, be insatiable, watch films, watch, streamers, I mean, and I keep telling people, like, for example, with Greenland in the news, I feel like I've kind of been there and know something about it because I watched this Danish series called Borgen on Netflix. And one whole season was about Russians coming to Greenland and how the Danes and the Greenlanders were sort of dealing with that. And it was fascinating. I also understand something about a parliamentary system, which we know nothing about in the United States. And that was like watching a foreign television series on Netflix, but it was actually really informative and really instructive. And so I feel like I learned something from that. And that was fiction, but it was like there was enough truth there of it was fascinating. So I think and I'm sure Brennan will feel the same way. Like, I've been to Brennan's house and I'm talking to him, but my eye kept going to his bookshelf that was full of all these fascinating book titles. And it's like that's just like you want to have a conversation about the books you've read and the movies you've seen. So, and that's why I like the New York Times. Like, oh my God, if I actually get the physical New York Times, it's terrible because it's like I want to just spend the entire Sunday reading the Sunday Times and I don't have time for it. But like every page, every section is fascinating, and it's just it's a treasure trove of for a curious person, it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Brennan, go ahead and add if you want with respect to skills that foster listening. But then I
Yeah.
also want you to answer the question, one of the questions in the chat with respect to building that trust with those very personal, sometimes hard, but certainly also sometimes vulnerable stories. Just, a couple thoughts on concrete skills. They're relevant everywhere, whether you're making a film, writing a story, or seeing a patient.
That's a great question. Thank you to see who asked it. Yeah, they're very interrelated ideas. I mean, you could think of being a good listener as being a good trust builder, right? I think they're one and the same goal. Um, I can just share a little bit about my process with respect to how to care. Um, I knew, some projects people are just like camera ready. I know the drill. I've done this before. Show up and leave by 5 so I can make it to dinner, right? There are those projects. This was not that. This was working with um, uh, people in a vocation that hadn't really been around cameras before, hadn't really had a spotlight on them. Depicting disability is hugely fraught and could be in not delicate hands, could be really damaging. It could promote stereotypes
Mhm.
intentionally or not. So yeah, I knew that was a big thing to address with this project specifically. And so I just kind of built on a process I've already established, which is before any camera gets turned on, I just go and be there. I go be a person. I go try to meet people. I try to spend time with them in their environment that they work in, that they live in, whatever that relates to the film and the story that we're telling. I just try to be there without a camera. Um, that's hugely important. And this is also why I don't like working on like gotcha journalism or cutting, edge journalism, documentaries ripped from the headlines that have like some kind of urgency. There's a lot of that going on in Minneapolis right now, and it feels kind of gross and icky. People coming,
Mm,
wanting to capitalize on the trauma and the chaos because they
mhm,
think it's going to make a great documentary. I hope some great documentaries come out of this, absolutely. But
mm,
I don't see a whole lot of filmmakers that I'm interacting with approaching it with the same kind of care, which is you need to spend time with people as a person before you spend time with them as a filmmaker. Because as soon as you put lights on, as soon as you put a microphone on someone's shirt, as soon as you turn a camera on, if you've ever been in that situation, you immediately feel awkward, you feel uncomfortable, you feel vulnerable.
mhm,
I have a theory if you really feel like activated and excited, that maybe there's some sociopathic tendencies happening there. Um, just kidding. But it's very rare that people love that experience. If they do, great, it makes your job easier. But for the most part, they don't. It's
mhm,
hugely vulnerable, especially if you have any kind of sensitivities about anything relating to your body, to your image, to how you speak, to your sense of worth, your sense of self. All that starts to feel like people are shining a spotlight on that. So it's an incredible responsibility, and I take it very, very seriously. And I feel like it's the most important part of my job. So just show up and be a person before you're asking anyone to expose
mhm,
themselves, to reveal anything, to be that vulnerable person in a camera, in front of a
mhm,
camera. So I spent a couple of days with Dan and his group, Dan just happens to be, in the best way, a diva. He loves having his image taken. He loves to like vamp and glam for the camera. He was so excited that I was there when he was painting. Like, and I just kept saying, Dan, you can't look into the camera. You can't look into the camera. Dan, I love you. You can't look into the camera. Um, so this is, it's one and the same. Like, if they can see me as a real person and they get the vision, they get that I'm a person that, has a certain amount of skill, so they're in good hands there. And I'm a person that has intentions that align with theirs. I'm not here to make anyone look bad. I'm not here to make anyone look dumb. I'm not here to do any gotcha, catch it, bait and switch kind of storytelling. There's a lot of that out there. That's not me. Some of those films that do that are more like truth to power films, and you're working with maybe public figures that aren't so honest themselves. Okay, that's a different approach. But in this nonfiction world that I'm living in, building that trust and making sure that goes to C's question, making sure I know enough about them and about what they do and who they are through questioning, through listening, that I have a great starting point, right? I'm not coming into this cold. I've done my research. I've done the reading. I've done the listening. Even before I show up, I have, I've acclimatized myself to what the issues of this world are, at least in terms of like, how it's been portrayed in media. So I'm bringing something to it. And then I'm bringing a sense of a vision. And then that vision has to be flexible because it really is about those people and they are guiding that vision. So in that kind of like, who are you? What do you do? Show me your world. I'm a real person with good intentions. You're a real person whose intentions I want to show and honor and celebrate on film. It's actually a pretty easy sell, after they get what you're doing, right? Like, I think we wouldn't be having this conversation with Dan if I didn't think Dan and his care workers were amazing. So that's all baked into the conversation. Now I just need to show up and get an understanding of who they are and have them get a sense of who I am. And, I love that part. That's just like making a new friend, right? Like that, which as you get older happens less and less. So you're happy to, be introduced to new people that you're really excited to hang out with and to share time with. So I hope that answers your question, but it is really just about like being nakedly honest with your intentions. So if you're a clinician, they got to know from the jump that you're there to serve them, right? And hopefully they do. Hopefully they have that trust built in just with the coat that you're wearing, with the badge, with the stethoscope, whatever. But if that's not there, that's the job, right? That's the job, is to do what you can to create the environment where they trust you.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Just listening to both of you thinking about concrete things that are relevant to all disciplines being discussed tonight, being insatiable, being curious, being authentic, being aligned with your intentions, being present, spending time with people before you go and care for that community or that group. There's so many good takeaways here that are applicable to the work, to the volunteer work, to the time spent outside of work that this future workforce and current workforce will be doing. In the few minutes that we have left, I want to address the question of how you handle and perhaps self-care in the midst of heavy topics. And of course, we have heavy topics as filmmaker, as healthcare professional, as citizen in the Twin Cities. So we're all well aware of heavy things. I have my thoughts, but I really want to turn to each of you about, how you handle the heaviness and how you care for yourself. And then, as part of your response, please also share some of those favorite things that might also align with your self-care, favorite movies, favorite books, favorite songs or podcasts. We compile a list that listeners can go and search through when they need something new to entertain or to distract or to educate. So I'm going to combine both of those kind of wrap up things for each of you. Yeah. Brendan, John, go for it.
Brennan, you want to go first?
I'll go and then you can have the last word. Yeah, these are incredibly hard times. And so my heart goes out to anyone here that's being affected in big or little ways. We're all feeling it in some levels, but some more than others. So my heart's with you, as all of our hearts are heavy. Burnout is a big thing to talk about in professional spaces. I also think there's a different kind of burnout happening right now with like the assault on our world, on our norms, on our sense of dignity, sense of decency, sense of humanity. But maybe the mechanism is the same, the things that burns us out in our work and the same thing that burns us out in dealing with the culture and the degradation of it at large. And that is like this realization, this feeling that there's either too much to do and not enough time to do it, whether that's in your job, or there's too many things to fix in the world and you feel powerless.
Mm-hmm.
That is the recipe for burnout. And so I think just naming what it is the first step in any kind of self-care. What are you experiencing? Right now, I'm feeling burnt out as hell with what's coming out of this administration and what's happening in our streets, and just the assault on everything that I care about in my life. And I have a lot of advantages and privileges that protect me against some of those things. And I'm still feeling incredibly burnt out. So what are these reserves that we can find and call on? For me, creativity is the thing. That has always been the antidote. That was my coping mechanism as a teenager, going through hard times, and feeling like, I was questioning my own worth, etc. Using that as fuel to reflect and to create is incredibly powerful. It is an antidote in of itself. Action of any kind does penetrate despair. So sometimes taking care of yourself is sitting and staring at the ceiling, and sometimes it is cracking open your journal, turning on some music, going for a walk, going for a run, finding a friend, going to a protest, going to one of these rooms where you pay to like scream and smash plates, anything, right? So you're part of, like, everyone's experiencing this right now, on some level, even the people that are on the other side of this issue. Everyone's experiencing some incredible chaos right now. You're not alone in that. You are part of a human culture that is experiencing something really, really profound and scary. And that should also be assuring to us. It's like, you're not the only one, and you never will be. Whatever you go on through your life, medical things, with your family, with yourself, someone's always been there. And that, for me, I don't know if this works for you all, but just reminding myself that, like, oh yeah, I'm not the first human of billions of humans to experiencing this kind of despair or this kind of frustration. So having for me, having a sense of history and a sense of how these kinds of forces have played out before, is not encouraging to me, but it's also, it keeps me from despair. That is my form of action right now, is to, like, how have people dealt with this in the past, right? And I'm talking particularly about the rise of authoritarianism, but that applies to pretty much any kind of despair or challenge you might have in your life, right? How have people dealt with this? There is a collective wisdom to our humanity. And some people have kind of already figured it out in a way. At least they've gotten you a few yards down the field further than you would on yourself. So lean on that, lean on history. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, I'll shut up in just a second. You mentioned recommendations along those lines. I always recommend this
Oh
book.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, if you
Sapiens.
want to like learn a little bit about how hard it's been to be a human for millions of years, this is a primer. It hasn't been an easy journey. And it's really cool. I love this book because it's about the kind of one of the core arguments is that humans became so successful in a way because of our ability to tell stories. Language came
Mm.
about, and that allowed us to create common truths and common myths that allowed strangers to trust one another. So instead of, chimpanzees, if you get more than 10 of them in a room together, they're going to rip each other apart. But humans passed the 10
Mm.
person mark because there was this trust through language, through common stories, etc. Just knowing that that's part of our DNA, that's like part of who we are, that we
Mm.
trust each other, that we've built our society, we've built our success, we've built our failures on stories, is a powerful reframing for a storyteller like me, but also I think for humans in general and for medical people who are telling a different kind of story. So
Brennan, who's the author of Sapiens?
name is Yuval Noah Harari.
Awesome. Thank
And
you.
they've broken it into 3 different graphic novels, which I'm reading to my 9-year-old right now. That's fun.
Very cool. Yes. I
All
think we
right,
can
so I've
all
gone over time.
agree.
Sorry, John.
We can all agree and really resonate with the suggestions that you shared with the things that you do. Just relate with so many of those things. And, normalizing that we're not the only one or the first one.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Love it. John, last words.
Well, one thing I'll just say is for all the folks on this call, you're in healthcare, and how lucky are we that we get paid? In my best days, I'll say to people like, "Man, I get paid to listen to stories." Like how incredible is that? I get paid to provide some degree of comfort to people on a daily basis. I may not cure things, I may not be fixing things, but I'm listening and we're coming up with a plan. And I always like to think too that when people come into the clinic, they might feel one way. And if when they leave, they feel in some level a little better, then I've done my job. And how successful is that? Even if it's like naming something like a condition that's not good, but now there's certainty of what we're dealing with. So that's helpful. Now that doesn't help burnout, and I think of course, get enough sleep, exercise, be connected. That all goes without saying. But I like what Brennan said about like leaning into creativity or leaning into. I mean, for me, it's like, okay, I can't do any more charts. I can't respond to any more My Chart messages. I can't. I just can't. And so I'll go back to Andor, or I'll watch The Crown again, or something. I'll pick some, whether it's Pluribus. I mean, I'm devouring a lot of these. This is like what an amazing time to be alive, to see all these amazing shows. They're
Mhm.
shot so beautifully, they're acted so well, they're written so well. It's just like this excess of riches. So I lean into that. My wife is a music educator. She's so busy. She's out tonight with Gitsy's. No, tonight's Minnesota Symphonic Winds. Last night was Gitsy's. She has pep bands. So I'm, with kids out of the house now at this point in my life. I walk the dog. I will watch something or I'll read something. And rather than saying like what my favorite books are, I just grab 5 things kind of on my bookshelf and on my nightstand. So I'm going to start with one I finished. I'm a huge fan of Philip Pullman. He wrote The Golden Compass and The Amber Spyglass and all of those. This is the sixth and final book, the Rosefield, the Book of Dust, Volume 3. So 6 books, finished this one. Uh,
Mm.
One that, and I think Brendan will probably echo this, this is not exactly a light read, but it's an important read, and that is On Tyranny.
Mm.
So this is essential reading. I was thinking about putting this on Facebook and just saying that essential reading, period, full stop. Timothy Snyder, history
Mm.
professor at Yale, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. I read it in 2017 when it first came out. It was sort of interesting reading it now in
Mm.
2026, it's a whole
Mm.
different read.
Mm.
Strongly recommend that of just the time we're in. And then I've got the book I'm truly reading right now. It's called The Director. It's a German book translated into English, fictitious director who goes back to Germany during World War II to make films. And there
Hmm.
too, perhaps a little echo of today's world of trying to make art in the time of a totalitarian feeling regime. Not quite the same, obviously, but it's interesting. And then two books that I'm planning to read. One is called Range, which
Hmm.
is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And I think as a family physician, this really resonates. And I'm thinking at this point in my career of legacy building a
Hmm.
little bit, like how do I tell the story of why primary care and family medicine general practice is so important.
Hmm.
And then finally, now this is a really fun event. Um, Daniel Pollock Pelsner is a Shakespeare scholar in Oregon
Hmm.
who wrote an article in the New Yorker magazine back in 2020, and it was sort of a tongue-in-cheek article about what Shakespeare actually did during the plague. And Roseanne Cash had put something on Twitter about it, and it was like ladies and gentlemen, what are you doing in quarantine? Shakespeare wrote King Lear. Like, come on, like get going, make some art. And so I actually reached out to him and said, "Hey, I'm making this show for public television. Could I have the rights to your piece that we can convert?" He said, "Oh, fine by me, but you have to go through Condé Nast, who owns the New Yorker." And one thing led to another, and we made this amazing little short film about this piece. Well, then I saw that he had just written this book called Lin-Manuel Miranda, The Education of an Artist. So
Hmm.
he has written a book about Lin-Manuel Miranda, the creator of In the Heights and Hamilton,
Hmm.
and who he feels is kind of like today's modern Shakespeare. Like he is just, this Puerto Rican,
Hmm.
amazing, polymath person who just succeeds at everything he does. And so there was a reading at the Guthrie a week ago Saturday.
Hmm.
Instead of being just a book signing reading, he invited BFA students from the U to sing excerpts from In the Heights and Hamilton. And I was almost like crying because I didn't realize like how much I needed that. And it was just great. And long story short, too, I had dinner with him at Awamni. He's in town visiting. I asked him, "Do you have any plans for Saturday night? Can I take you out to dinner?" So we went to Awamni. And then I got a picture of him holding the Emmy Award that his piece was a part of that show.
Hmm.
So that was kind of a fun full circle kind of thing to have. So there you go. Some of my current and immediate past reads.
Those are fabulous. Thank you. And thank you both for sharing about your work together and about your paths getting to where your paths did cross, and also for sharing just some really practical skills building, just some reality, some ways to handle the real world today and tomorrow, whatever tomorrow and the next tomorrows hold. Thank you all for listening and hopefully for benefiting. Um, I'm confident that you've benefited and seeds have been sown that will bear fruit down the road. Thank you all this evening.
Thank you for listening. Let us know what you gained from this conversation by writing a quick review. Please share this podcast with others, subscribe for future conversations, and check out our other episodes. Explore health sciences at the University of Minnesota at health.umn.edu.